Welcome to the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act training overview for Northwest Arkansas Community College. This training encompasses the two areas of Foia that affect you the most, one being public records and one being public meetings. This is a really high-level overview that will help you have the tools that you need to be able to understand Arkansas Foia. The illustration to the right is an accurate depiction of what a FOIA request can look and feel like. No FOIA is ever the same. Some take months to complete and require a lot of collaboration with other departments around the college. Some may only take a few minutes to complete. It's very subjective. It's important to remember in Arkansas that FOIA laws are very liberal and that you always should lean on the side of production. 9 times out of 10, the documentation that a requester is asking for will likely not fall under an exemption and will be available for production. Once a FOIA request is received, it must be addressed immediately. If you receive a FOIA request, please submit it to the Policy Risk and Compliance Office for response and review. We will take it from there. The Arkansas Freedom of Information Act was initially adopted in 1967. It's codified in statute, and you can also find it in NWAC Policy Stat under Policy 2002. FOIA covers two broad areas that this presentation will encompass. One of those is public records. FOIA allows an Arkansas citizen to have the right to inspect and receive copies of public records of publicly funded institutions, which NWAC falls under, unless there is an exemption highlighted under the law. The other side of the FOIA coin is public meetings. FOIA says that most meetings of governing bodies, which is our NWAC Board of Trustees, those meetings are going to be open to the public. The purpose of FOIA is to make sure that Arkansas citizens are fully advised of the activities and the decisions that their public officials, which include officials at NWAC, or a publicly funded institution of higher education, are making. As stated in the previous slide, please remember that Arkansas case law sets forth a very liberal interpretation of FOIA. Again, the Department of Policy, Risk, and Compliance acts as the custodian of records and responds to all FOIA requests received by the college. The statutory definition on this slide encompasses most anything and everything that we as employees use to perform our job duties. Emails, calendar invites, any sort of writing, or anything that is compiled data can be considered a public record under this very, very elaborate definition. While that can seem intimidating, it is important to understand that FOIA covers records and not information. It's not our job as a state agency to create new records in order to be compliant with a request. For example, if a requester asks for minutes of a meeting where no minutes were taken, it's not our duty under FOIA to create minutes in order to comply. If we have nothing that is responsive to the request, we indicate that to the requester. Emails or letters sent to private email addresses or home addresses of public officials or employees of the college can be subject to FOIA if they involve college business. This also applies to text messages on personal cell phones. If you have a text message that discusses business, that discusses anything within the course and scope of your employment, someone wishes to see it, and you have records of that, it can be subject to FOIA. The statutory definition, as discussed in the previous slide of public records, is very encompassing. There are, however, exemptions to what can and cannot be produced to a requestor. The Arkansas FOIA law allows for many exemptions to public records access, as you can see depicted on this slide. If a request is received for any information that would require a social security number, a home address, any personal information that may have to do with health, anything outside of your course and scope of your employment, that documentation or information is exempt from public consumption. It's also important to remember here that as an employee, it's a professional courtesy to really make an effort to keep your personal and private information separate. Even though we work diligently to respond appropriately to any FOIA request that's received, it's always best practice to keep personal information outside of your work email and outside of your work documentation so as it isn't inadvertently produced when it shouldn't be. Personnel records are typically not subject to an exemption. Personnel records can include an educational background of an employee, your name, contract, employee application, or resume. Salary information of any NWAC employee is not exempt from public consumption. If someone wishes to know your salary information, you are not required to have notice of that request and the salary information is disclosed. We are state employees and salary transparency is part of the Arkansas FOIA. If the Policy Risk and Compliance Department does receive a request for your personnel records, we are required to give an employee notice within 24 hours and inform them that they may seek an opinion from the Attorney General regarding exemption of their records. While you do have that right, I will inform you that every time that an employee has reached out to the Attorney General asking for an exemption, it has been denied. Remember, Arkansas FOIA law always leans on the side of production. 9 times out of 10, what is being asked for will be given to the requester. Personnel versus evaluation records. Employee evaluation or job performance records, for example, any sort of personal improvement plan, are generally going to be closed and not subjected to FOIA. However, if an employee has been suspended or terminated, where the records of an evaluation or job performance plan form the basis of such a decision to suspend or terminate, at that time, the records are then available for public consumption. Personnel records are all records that are not evaluation records, and they must be disclosed unless doing so constitutes under the law clearly unwarranted invasion of privacy. This is where, again, the liberal interpretation of Arkansas FOIA law comes into play, and that most times these records will be disclosed because the public interest will likely outweigh the privacy interest of the employee. Evaluation records are any records created by the employer to evaluate an employee that details the employee's job performance. They are not disclosable again unless the employee has been suspended or terminated as a result of those records. Now we'll discuss the other side of FOIA, public meetings. The statutory definition of public meetings is listed on this slide, but what you can keep in mind is that all meetings of governing bodies are going to be public meetings. A governing body is a panel that makes decisions, and in our case, this is the NWAC Board of Trustees. What is a meeting? And at the end of the day, it's going to depend upon the facts of a given situation. Northwest Arkansas Community College Board of Trustees meetings are held on a monthly basis at the college. These meetings are going to be covered under the public meetings spectrum of FOIA. The public must be allowed to attend board meetings even though they don't necessarily participate. The public has to be able to also see how each individual board member votes on a motion. If a vote is taken in executive session where the public is not allowed to attend, when the board comes out of executive session, they must on the record indicate how they vote so the public can be made aware. All meetings of the NWAC Board of Trustees meetings, public meetings, must be recorded under statute. These recordings have to be kept for at least 1 year in a format that will allow for its reproduction if a citizen requests it. The recording requirement, however, does not apply to executive sessions. The public meetings side of FOIA is very subjective. How many members of the board make a meeting? The law tells us that a quorum does not have to be involved for a meeting to take place under FOIA law. However, if there is more than one board member in one place, depending upon the facts of the situation, it could be determined that a meeting is occurring and that FOIA will apply. Now, it won't likely be considered a meeting under FOIA if more than one member of our board are at a social gathering, such as a Rotary Club, where NWAC business would be incidental and intermittent. In these situations, our board members will likely sit in different areas of the room so that they will not give the impression to the public that they're discussing college business in what could be deemed a meeting. It's also probably not going to be deemed a meeting if our board has no control over the conference or Rotary Club or function or proceeding that they're in attendance. When the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act was enacted in 1967, the idea of a virtual meeting was outside the norm. In our post-COVID world, virtual meetings are commonplace. Legislation has now been enacted to allow public meetings to take place virtually. The NWAC Board of Trustees meetings are given a Teams link with every invite prior to their occurring. The public has the opportunity to log in virtually on the Teams link to be able to hear the public business that's being done by the board. These meetings also must be recorded and kept for a year, just as if they were being conducted in person. Aside from virtual meetings being held via Teams, there are other ways that virtual public meetings can be held, but it's important to understand that they have to be held the right way and that there are some ways that business can be conducted which would be a violation of FOIA. Meetings held by conference calls via telephone are going to be subject to FOIA's public meetings. The public must have the right to hear or otherwise monitor the call by the use of either speakerphones or knowing the conference call number to dial in order to be able to listen to the meeting. Polling calls, for example, talking to board members individually to see how they're going to vote on a matter, secret telephone calls are not allowed and will be a violation of FOIA. Our emails meetings? The FOIA's open meetings provisions does apply to email exchanges among members. If members are taking votes via email and the public is unaware, this is a violation of FOIA. If you receive a FOIA request, contact Erin Campbell immediately. That's me, and my contact information is right there on the slide. In most cases, NWAC has 24 to 72 hours under the law to acknowledge, research, review, and respond to any FOIA request received. These are also going to all be subjective and will depend upon the complexity of the request. The clock starts ticking from the moment any college employee receives a FOIA request, not when it's received by the Policy Risk and Compliance Office. It's important to also remember that a FOIA request does not have to be formal and does not have to list any statutory language in order to be considered a FOIA request. A FOIA request can be informal as well and can be a phone call, for example, for someone who wants a list of applicants from a job position that has been posted by the college. When you receive any information request, contact me, let me know. It's my job to navigate and to review these requests. It's not something that you have to do alone, and it's not something that we want you to do alone. Noncompliance with FOIA can result in civil or criminal penalties for the college and for employees. It's also important to realize that noncompliance can also cause reputational damage to the college. We don't want to give the impression to our taxpayers that we aren't good stewards of state dollars by not responding and following the law appropriately. If there is only one thing that you remember about FOIA in this particular FOIA presentation, let it be this last slide. Here are some really good take-home reminders that drive the point as to why FOIA plays such an important role in our jobs as a state employee. Email, text, and write only what you would feel confident being quoted on the front page of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Email, text, and write only what you would feel comfortable defending in your own deposition. Are you forwarding an email? Take a minute to look at what you're sending. What is the context of that email and what content is within the body? NWAC does not encourage personal business on work emails. It's easier to keep that separate. Be careful when you're sending emails which contain opinion-only statements, and take the thumper route here. If you can't say something nice, please just don't say anything at all. You'll see examples of diagnosis emails that are on this slide, which are quotes that have had to be produced in FOIA requests received by the college. Assume that any email, text message, or other electronic communication that you send within the course and scope of your employment regarding work matters can be used against you in the FOIA sense. But fear not, the Policy Risk and Compliance Office is here to help you navigate any FOIA requests that you receive, and we're here for any questions that you may have. So please feel free to reach out if you feel like you're in a FOIA difficulty. We're happy to help. Thank you.